Last weekend we heard Jesus tell us, I am the good shepherd. This weekend he tells us, I am the true vine. I have that inscribed at the base of the chalice that I use. I am the true vine. And the reason I chose that scripture because, as you know, many of you know my last name, Bonavitacola. Many people think means good life, Coca-Cola or something. That's what I grew up hearing. It actually means good vine tender, so I think it fits. This is one of the 7 I ams of Jesus. Jesus tells us, I am the light of the world. I am the bread of life. I am the gate through which the sheep enter. I am the resurrection. I am the way, the truth, and the life. At the end of the gospel, especially in John's gospel, when Jesus is questioned by the high priest and they ask, who are you? He responds simply, I am. Jesus identifies himself with the God of Israel. Remember, I am is the name God gave to Moses at the burning bush. When Moses asked, who should I tell the people sent me? God says, tell them I am. God had, throughout the Old Testament, described Israel as a vine that he planted to grow among the nations. And I think what Jesus is saying, I am the vine, he's saying, I am Israel, and from me will grow God's chosen people. Now that's not a statement that a spiritual leader or a guru or even a political leader would really make. Gandhi or the Buddha never claimed to have such status, but Jesus did. So if he is who he says he is, then it's true that apart from him, we can do nothing. So the urgent question then is this: how do we remain in him? What does that look like in practice? It may help to consider for a moment the imagery being used here by Jesus in the gospel, the vine, the branches, the whole garden concept. I remember my father always every summer planted a summer garden, vegetable garden. And it used to produce an incredible amount of fruit at the end of the season. And I think that while he really enjoyed doing it, it was sort of therapeutic for him, he really enjoyed most of all giving it all away and having people enjoy the fruit of his work. But watching him do it, I knew it took a whole lot of work. The soil has to be tilled. My father even kept his own compost so he could fertilize the soil. And of course, weeds were always a challenge, and staying ahead of them, on top of them, was important because even just after a nice summer rain, the weeds could grow really quickly and take over. And then, of course, there were the insects that you had to keep out that would come in and oftentimes destroy a plant or even an entire crop. So he seemed to know what flowers to plant among the plants to keep different insects out of the garden. And of course, then there were the animals, the wild animals, deer, groundhogs, rabbits, that were pretty greedy when it came to the fruit. And it wasn't a question of letting them eat some, they just always wanted to eat all of it. So keeping them out was a challenge. My father's star produce was his tomatoes. He grew these incredibly delicious tomatoes every year. A tomato plant becomes vinous. It has vines. It grows so that it can produce a lot of fruit. And that means you have to support it. And I often thought it was almost a marvel of engineering, the way my father was able to stake and hold the tomato plants in place and allow the vines to grow. Because if you don't do that, the vines tend to grow in on themselves. Then they block out the light. They'll still produce fruit, but it will be inferior fruit. So pruning was a regular thing. And if it's done correctly, it really helps a plant to produce quality fruit, to strengthen itself. I often think of that, and since I've been here in Arizona, I've tried to replicate that, and I have to admit I'm a complete failure here in the desert. But that's the image that Jesus uses to describe our relationship with him. Remaining connected obviously takes some work just as good gardening does. And going on autopilot just won't do. A few years back, we ran in our diocese the Catholics Come Home campaign. And a lot of people gratefully came home. And when we asked the people, why did you leave? About 90% of them had no particular reason. They said there was no great storm that pushed us out of the church, no one issue. It was just sort of a slow fade. 1 week I didn't come because I was sick. The next week I was busy. The next week something else was on my schedule. And so 1 week turned into 2 weeks turned into a month turned into 6 months, 6 months turned into a year turned into 5 years. It's just the way it sort of works for most of us. And any one of us can find ourselves indifferent at any point. So Jesus warned us, be careful not to be hot nor cold. So the question then, of course, for us is, how do we remain attached to the vine? Well, for us Catholics, the vine is the church. This is the thing that keeps us connected to Jesus. And if we separate ourselves from that, we simply, as Jesus says, can't bear any fruit. Now, that might sound rather exclusive. What about those who say, I don't really need the church, I can have my own personal relationship with Christ, I can do it on my own? Well, it's truly a rare person that can really do it on their own, because most of us need the protection of others, community where we find accountability. And after all, knowing that we need to stay connected to Christ and to be careful not to allow things to pull us off the vine. After we finish marriage preparation with couples, I often tell them to stay connected to the church, stay connected to their faith. And it's easy to not do that because life is good. A nice relationship, starting a family, a house, a career, things are going well. But I always assure them at some point during their life together, curveballs will come that they can't anticipate. Things will happen, and unless they're connected to the vine, they will easily topple. They will easily be torn apart. One of my heroes of the 20th century is the great German Lutheran pastor Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was eventually executed in the concentration camps. But very early on, he was really one of the first persons to see exactly what was going on in Germany. He understood what the Third Reich was really trying to do. And most of all, as a pastor of the German church, which was the state church, he saw the manipulation that was going on. And he warned his fellow pastors, his fellow bishops, not to fall for it, to remain attached to the true faith of Jesus Christ. And for him, the clincher came when the church, in its official document, its official statement of belief, inserted, at the insistence of the Third Reich and Adolf Hitler, what was called the Aryan paragraph. That simply said that anyone who was a convert from Judaism to the German Lutheran Church could no longer be part of the Christian church. And Bonhoeffer said, if you do this, you'll separate yourself from the true church, from the true faith of Jesus Christ, and you'll simply no longer be his church. And that, of course, is what happened, and Bonhoeffer, as a result, started his own communion called the Confessing Church to save the integrity of Christianity. But, we can find ourselves on the same path, being pulled away from the church, being pulled away from the faith that we profess, and it can be subtle, sometimes it can be high-pressured. We have to listen again to the gospel of Jesus. Remain in me, stay connected to me because I am the true vine. So we do that in simple ways. We listen to the word that's proclaimed to us in the Gospels, and we stay connected to the sacraments in the church. And so I think there are, for us, two ways that we stay connected primarily. First, we remain in community. Even when we don't feel like it, we still show up. And the community that we stay connected to is one that knows, loves, and celebrates Jesus as Lord. I think that should tell us there's really no such thing as a solitary Christian. We just simply can't go it alone. But we also must be people of prayer and worship in our own intimate, private lives. We must make sure to be in touch, in tune with Jesus, knowing him and being known by him. And as Jesus says, one of the most extraordinary promises of prayer is that whatever we ask in his name will be granted. Well, that's because if we remain truly connected to him, the vine, just as the plant is connected to the vine, we will have the same mind as he does, which is the mind of the Father. Whatever we ask for will be what the Father wants, will be the Father's will. But as he reminds us, the opposite is true. If you disconnect, then you'll bear no fruit. And here's the challenging part for us. Jesus reminds us that we all have to go through periods of pruning, and it usually hurts. We must be ready for the Father's pruning knife in our lives. But this way, we really can bear much good fruit. For that to happen, some of the extra growth that happens on a vine needs to be cut away, likewise with ourselves. And remember this, the vine dresser is never closer to the vine, taking more thought over its long-term health and productivity than when he has his pruning knife in his hand.
Like what you just heard? Visit Our Lady of Mount Carmel's social media pages for more faith-filled content. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Read the OLMC Tempe blog on Tumblr. Your Catholic community is online. Let's stay connected.